He's been described as a self-obsessed fool, the definition of a donkey general, and a rank amateur. But has this Royal Engineer been unfairly treated by history? Or was he really an incompetent military blunderer? Today, we're going to look at the military career and medals of Lieutenant General Hunter-Weston, also known as Hunter-Bunter. Although initially hailed as a slashing man of action, Hunter-Weston would see his reputation in tatters during the First World War. But we want to know, was this chap really a crazy fool? Or was he a misunderstood general? The son of an aristocratic army officer, Aylmer Hunter-Weston was born at Hunterston near West Kilbride in 1864. At school, he did well in chemistry, physics and sports, with a fascination for electricity. As a young man, in 1882, he decided to join the Royal Engineers and would be commissioned as a second lieutenant in 1884. Hunter-Weston would then go on to specialised training at the School of Military Engineering in 1884. On home garrison duty, he would work on improving fortifications in port towns like Milford Haven. Like Victorian legend and super stallion General Sir Blood, Hunter-Weston would go on to command telegraph troops. He would join the Telegraph Battalion in 1886 and spend some time in Aldershot. Like many Royal Engineering officers, he would then apply for a secondment to India, and he was posted to the Bengal Sappers and Miners. The unit was headquartered at Roorkee, north of Delhi. Like many of his fellow officers, Hunter-Weston would spend his spare time big game hunting, pig sticking and playing sports like polo. Like fellow dodgy General Charles Townshend of Cut fame, who we've covered before, Hunter-Weston would also be into amateur dramatics. He would come to participate in 2 campaigns on the northwest frontier. In 1891, promoted to captain, Hunter-Weston would be sent on a punitive expedition to deal with a local uprising in the Moronzai Valley, known as the Somme Campaign. I shall read an extract from my book, Class of Courage. British road building in the area had aroused the suspicion of local tribes, who believed this was a threat to their independence. A local Islamic cleric, Syed Mir Basha, declared a jihad, and tribesmen attacked a British camp at Durban. This obligated the British to send an expeditionary force of 8,000 men in 3 columns against the tribesmen. Pathan forces were estimated at about 1,000 hardened fighters, with several thousand others in support. After resisting the initial British advance, the majority of Pathan fighters retreated and dispersed. The expedition then entered the Somme Valley, destroying villages, knocking down defensive towers, and finally imposing a peace settlement. In this campaign, 28 British and Indian troops were killed and 73 wounded. Pathan casualties are unclear. During the campaign, Hunter-Weston's main tasks would be building pontoons, roads, fortified posts, and demolishing tribal fortifications, usually village towers. In 1894, he would be sent in a similar campaign in Waziristan, in charge of all engineers on the expedition. If you want to learn more about the Waziristan campaign, we did cover it in a prior video, so I will put up a link at the end of this video so you can click on that and learn more if you want to. It's also covered in my book, Class of Courage. Buy it now. An Amazon link is in the description. On this campaign, Hunter-Weston would be lightly wounded, leaving him with a scar above his left ear, and he would be promoted to Major in 1895. So far, so good. His reputation is pretty solid at this stage. The next year, in April 1896, Kitchener, who was short on engineers, would request him as a special service officer for his upcoming campaign in the Sudan. It would be known as the Dongola Expedition, down the Nile. Hunter-Weston would focus on improving logistics and transport along the Nile River, surveying cataracts and dynamiting obstacles. Using inflated animal skins as life jackets, like in the Man Who Would Be King movie, Hunter-Weston would volunteer personally to carry out reconnaissance and surveys of river crossings, when ordered by Kitchener. For this hazardous task of swimming in the water, Hunter-Weston recalled, "My costume was simple, artistic, and well suited to the purpose, for it consisted only of a large helmet, a sun umbrella, and my birthday suit." It's unclear at this stage if Lord Kitchener was looking on with his binoculars, or if indeed he was impressed by the size of Hunter-Weston's helmet. Perhaps he was, as Hunter-Weston is later recommended for Staff College by Kitchener, and he does well there. With war breaking out in South Africa against the Boers in 1899, Hunter-Weston is deployed to theatre and distinguishes himself as a daring and energetic officer, serving with the Royal Engineers Mounted Field Troop in an independent command. Operating in an environment of fast-moving raids and sabotage missions, such as blowing up enemy railway lines deep behind Boer positions, the conflict often seemed straight from the pages of a boy's own adventure story. Amid this harsh and unpredictable warfare, Hunter-Weston gained a reputation as an astute, effective, and resolute commander, earning the DSO. Due to his almost reckless courage and success, he was loved by the press, reporting on the war. And already self-confident, it may be likely that all this media attention inflated his ego, as he would afterward gain a reputation, in addition to being well-dressed and sociable, to brimming with self-confidence to the point of arrogance. In October 1901, he would get hospitalised with fever, but desperate to return to the action, ignores the doctor's advice and returns to duty too soon. He would then have a relapse and would be invalided home in January 1902 to recover. So essentially, he comes out of the war in South Africa with a reputation enhanced and seen as a bit of a dashing and resolute officer, loved by the media. When he recovered, he would command the 11th Field Company as well as various staff and training positions. In 1911, he would become Assistant Director to Military Training at the War Office, and in February 1914 was promoted to Brigadier General, commanding the 11th Infantry Brigade. When the war broke out, the 11th Brigade, included in the 4th Division, was sent out as part of the British Expeditionary Force, or BEF, to France. Hunter-Weston's brigade would perform well. Once, when ordered to hold their position during a battle, Hunter-Weston would have 2 horses shot dead under him. In total, during the whole war, allegedly 8 horses would be shot under Hunter-Weston, illustrating his personal bravery. In September 1914, he would take great personal risk at Venizelle. Leading from the front, he would literally lead his men across a damaged bridge, creeping over the remnants of the girders during the night, under threat of enemy attack. This would only enhance his reputation as being a dynamic leader. An interesting point here, though, during this time, Hunter-Weston would also be criticised by soldiers for being a bully and a pest whilst they were marching. Although his men had been constantly fighting, on the move for days, eaten little, and were knackered, Hunter-Weston would constantly hassle them, riding up and down the column flanks, trying to get them to march properly in line and sort their dressing out, giving them very little respite. It could be interpreted by some as a very unsympathetic way of command. A motor enthusiast in his spare time, Hunter-Weston would also surprise his men by supervising them at times from a motorbike. In December, his brigade was involved in a costly attack on German trenches. The attack itself was hasty and unprepared. 58 men were killed. Hunter-Weston would write, "We were successful on the whole, but many casualties for relatively little gain." He would get a throat complaint during that winter in the trenches, which would continue to aggravate him, perhaps affecting his later decision-making. We can only speculate. He would be promoted to Major General, and then, in early 1915, given command of the 29th Division, about to embark on the Gallipoli Campaign. Hunter-Weston was pessimistic about their chances for success, stating that the force landed would then end up like a cow stuck halfway up a tree. Nevertheless, he would crack on with his task and display enthusiasm amongst the men. In April 1915, before the troops disembarked at Gallipoli, he would give them a motivational speech, and in it he would say, "They must expect heavy losses by bullets, by shells, by mines, and by drowning." At Gallipoli, the British command would overestimate the number of Turkish troops that were there. Once ashore, Hunter-Weston was given a series of objectives to take. His various assaults to take these hills or vantage points would be known as the Battles of Krithia. To seize these enemy positions, Hunter-Weston would try multiple frontal assaults and set-piece attacks with little fire support and limited artillery and ammunition, with only 72 guns supporting 25,000 men. Approximately 2,000 British casualties would occur amongst his forces. On the 24th of May, Hunter-Weston was promoted to Lieutenant General and given command of the newly formed 8th Corps. In an amazing climb of ranks, he would go on from being a Lieutenant Colonel in January 1914 to a Lieutenant General in less than 18 months. Amazing! Hunter-Weston would also acquire a reputation as an eccentric man prone to laughter. He would be seen cheerfully encouraging his men to the front line, but also getting a reputation for making flippant, insensitive comments in the face of such horrific fighting. Examples are, on hearing of heavy losses on a day, that it was worth blooding that battalion. Casualties? What do I care for casualties? And that casualties are worth it. He would blurt these out at inappropriate times. Talk about putting your foot in your mouth. One alleged quote attributed to Hunter-Weston stated, "Every man must die at his post rather than retire." A Captain Crawley stated, "Hunter-Weston is a breezy optimist, a fighting man and keen, but he pours his men's blood out like water without turning a hair, and didn't make a success of it." In July 1915, Hunter-Weston, clearly not having his big helmet on display, would receive sunstroke or perhaps enteric fever and would be hospitalised for 10 days and lose 2.5 stone. He would be evacuated and would leave with his reputation damaged, although failure at Gallipoli was not down to him, to be fair, and it can be blamed more on the politicians and senior planners, giving Hunter-Weston and his fellow generals a poisoned chalice. Hunter-Bunter would also be nicknamed the Butcher of Helles, and here's a quote: "The 29th Division is down to small numbers now. These continued frontal attacks are terrible, and I fear generals will be called butchers by the troops. Hunter-Weston already has that name with the 29th. Supposedly, an Anzac liaison officer would state of Hunter-Weston that he was more hated than most of the generals. The author Geoffrey Regan stated, "Hunter-Weston rejected the idea of surprise or setting off at dawn and dusk, and seemed obsessed with attacking frontally and in broad daylight, thereby ensuring maximum casualties." I think that's a bit tongue-in-cheek, but you get the drift. Hunter-Weston would then be sent to the Western Front during 1916 to prepare for the Battle of the Somme. Across a 3.5-mile front, his newly reformed 8th Corps would be given the task of advancing on the enemy during the Somme offensive in July. Douglas Haig, by this stage, distrusted Hunter-Weston. When planning the offensive, Hunter-Weston was tasked to submit an attack plan which was deemed conservative by Haig, and he then pressured Hunter-Weston to be more ambitious in planning his corps' assault, which was to have dire consequences. During the battle, Hunter-Weston would be criticised for making the mistake of blowing up the Hawthorne mine placed under German lines and alerting them to an upcoming attack. To be fair on Hunter-Weston, he had originally asked to prematurely detonate the mine 4 hours before the main assault to ensure the crater was taken. He had no experience of mining and would be denied this request, and as a compromise was only allowed to blow up the mine 10 minutes early. This warned the Germans of an imminent attack by the 29th Division, who would get wiped out, along with 8 Corps' other elements. Although routinely being accused of micromanaging his troops, bizarrely, on the day of the attack, Hunter-Weston was peculiarly absent and passive, waiting for reports to come in. His corps would suffer 16,000 casualties on the 1st of July, but he would not be sacked. Hunter-Weston would continue commanding on the Western Front, but would no longer be trusted with offensive operations again, and his corps would be placed in quiet sectors of the line just to hold the positions. Around this time, amongst the troops, he would gain the nickname of Hunter-Bunter, after the fictional, portly, pompous and conceited schoolboy Billy Bunter. I've read 2 reasons as to how he got the name. The first was that it was initially given at Sandhurst as a cadet, and later, after his leadership calamities, became widespread. But that seems unlikely, as Billy Bunter wasn't published in comic books until 1908. The second reason was because of Hunter-Weston's ample girth, which reminded the men of the comic book character, in addition to his personality. Although Hunter-Weston was into fitness all of his life, perhaps at this stage he'd put on a little bit of portly middle-age spread. It can happen to all of us, you know. Hunter-Weston would have powerful connections and was known to write directly to the king throughout the war, I guess because of his aristocratic background. Perhaps he also had a cousin at Horse Guards and friends at court. His corps would also now spend time rebuilding, reconstituting and training new batches of reinforcements whilst in the rear. Hunter-Weston would be fond of spit and polish, and apparently his headquarters was magnificent, with everyone gleaming with polished buttons and boots. Hunter-Weston seemed to feel that the rank and file enjoyed his regular inspections, as they were different to other generals, in his opinion. He would continue to do rounds of the front lines and had an obsession with inspecting latrines. Hunter-Weston would also enjoy giving parades and indulging in long speeches to his men, no doubt asking if they were looking forward to the big push and bullying off for the final chukker. Hunter-Weston wrote once that yesterday I spent the morning going around the heavy artillery with a retinue of generals, colonels, etc. To them I gave addresses of various essentials of their job. They were all very interested and thanked me in what I had taught them. It is curious to find in almost all the different arms which vary so much in their material and training, I know a good deal more of these officers' jobs than they do. However, I suppose that's what's bound to be the case with a general. Sir Cuthbert Headland, who was at Gallipoli, was quoted as saying, "Hunter-Weston was a tremendous windbag, with the hide of an elephant and the vanity of a peacock." Incredibly, then Hunter-Weston would be elected to the House of Commons, representing North Ayrshire as a Scottish Unionist MP, even though he was still a serving corps commander. However, there is a rationale for this. Field Marshal Haig, clashing with then Secretary of State for War and later Prime Minister Lloyd George, was worried that the army was undergoing a manpower crisis and not being represented adequately at Parliament, and needed a well-connected advocate. Hunter-Weston, with his aristocratic background and connections, would be ideally suited to this task, as a voice from the trenches, and indeed, he gave a great first speech in Parliament. Afterwards, when back in France visiting his troops, he would also like to introduce himself to private soldiers and ask if they knew him, and if not, introduce himself as Lieutenant General Sir Aylmer Hunter-Weston, MP. He would become a trusted point man in Parliament for Haig, and also his corps was used for visiting VIPs and dignitaries such as royalty, US politicians, etc. In this diplomatic role, Hunter-Bunter would excel as a host to the hoi polloi. Not sure what the rank and file would have thought of that, but I'm just going to read a quote now from Richard Holmes' excellent book, Tommy, about Hunter-Weston. Occasionally, a corps commander's attempts to be well known misfired. Lieutenant General Sir Aylmer Hunter-Weston of 8th Corps always introduced himself by his full name and title, proudly adding MP after being elected to Parliament in October 1916. In the bitter winter of 1917-18, Hunter-Bunter decided to wish troops departing on leave trains a Merry Christmas. An aide-de-camp would open the carriage door, and the General would intone, "I am Lieutenant General Sir Aylmer Hunter-Weston, MP, your Corps Commander, and I wish you a happy Christmas." From the smoky fog of one carriage, a disembodied voice declared, "And I'm the Prince of Wales, and wish you'd shut the bloody door." 8th Corps would later perform well in the latter stages of the war during the 100 Days. His men would show flexibility and use combined arms tactics, but by that time the damage to his reputation was already done, and notably for this period he would be placed under tighter control and given more resources. Hunter-Weston would remain an MP until 1935 and won 6 successful elections. In that role, he would argue for a Ministry of Defence and worked hard for servicemen's interests, particularly those affected by shell shock in what were then termed lunatic asylums. He would be active in the Royal Legion and war memorials. Aged 75, he would die, falling off his estate's roof whilst doing daily exercises. Apparently, he lost his footing and balance and fell off. His medals are Knight Commander of the Order of the Bath, Distinguished Service Order, India General Service Medal 1854, with Waziristan 1894 5 clasp and Samana 1891 clasp. Find out more in my book. Queen Sudan Medal, Queen South Africa Medal, with which I think I counted 7 clasps on his picture. King South Africa Medal, 1914 Star for being in the British Expeditionary Force, British War Medal, Victory Medal, and foreign medals which look like an Ottoman Order of Osmania and Khedive Medal, I guess for his time in the Sudan. For his extensive humanitarian work, especially advocating for ex-soldiers' welfare and healthcare, Hunter-Weston was appointed Bailiff Grand Cross of the Order of St. John, a civilian decoration. Hunter-Weston would be described as an officer of intelligence, but lacking mental balance, given to extravagant and flamboyant gestures, and far too interested in irrelevant detail. To me, that seems suggestive of a man who was promoted far too rapidly, too soon, without time to properly understand his job. It would be like being promoted from corporal to regimental sergeant major in less than 18 months, and being expected to perform seamlessly. His role would also not have been helped by the lack of equally experienced staff officers or senior officers around him. Remember, this was a time when the British Army was rapidly expanding, and for many roles just needed bums on seats. The drawback, it seems, is that his rapid rise also inflated his already huge ego, leading him to become more unlikable and therefore a character easy to attack and vilify. Hunter-Weston was also unlucky in that for his first 2 big tests of command, he drew both Gallipoli and the Somme. Let me know if you think Hunter-Weston has been unkindly treated by history or not, as the case may be. He seems a bit of a mixed bag, to be honest. Clearly in his younger years, he embraced new tactics and innovation, and was even successful in the early part of the First War. It could be argued that at Gallipoli he was given an impossible task, and perhaps because of his self-centred and somewhat pompous personality was easy to label as a scapegoat. Perhaps he is an example of the Peter principle, promoted above your rank and capability, but I do feel in some sense he's been shortchanged by history and the media. Researching this video, there hasn't been a huge amount of information about Hunter-Weston out there. 2 great sources I used were a talk given by Dave Barras on the Western Front YouTube Association channel, and Pete and Gary's Military History podcast. Both are worth checking out. Thanks for watching. I hope you found some value from this, and I'll see you in the next one.